Angular Connect, can you hear me? Yes. Can you see my slides? Everyone? Great, so it means that we can start. So hello everyone, my name is Marta, I'm from Poland, and today I will be talking about totally great topic, this is offline first in Angular. And before I start my session, I have a question for you. So how many of you have ever heard about PWA? Good answer, so you don't need introduction. I can skip some of the slides, so it's very great. And my second question is, whoever built PWA? Good answer, in Angular? Maybe? Good answer, yes. So if you're using Angular, it's very easy to create your basic PWA with basic PWA features, because you can apply it simple one command, this is ng-add Angular PWA, and a lot of files that are required to build your PWA will generate it automatically. And it's very simple, especially where you have a static data in your app. And the character of your data is the main factor that tells you that it's worthy to convert your web app into progressive web apps. And today I want to focus about managing data in your app and show you one approach, which is offline first, that allows you to store your data locally and synchronize it with the backend automatically. And it's also a good way to improve performance of your app and user experience. And a few words about me. So I'm from Poland, I live in Warsaw, and I work for a company called ePoint. This is a software house where is almost focused on financial and e-commerce sector. And e-commerce, there's a lot of use cases of PWA. And now I'm working on the project that is in Angular, and we use Spartacus. Spartacus is also written in Angular. This is a storefront for e-commerce. And it allows you to create components and new things that are necessary for e-commerce and are fully progressive and open source. So you can find a code on GitHub. And I'm a huge of PWA. And my journey with PWA started over 1 year ago when I was writing my master's thesis. And in my thesis, I compared progressive web apps and hybrid apps. And then I also started creating an open source project, this PWA Fire. In this project with my admin, we create open source resources, code labs, and tools that allows you to create PWA easier and with best practices for web apps. And I'm a huge fan of community. I'm a member and organizer at Google Developers Group Warsaw and Women Techmakers Warsaw. And if you have never heard about these groups, or you want to join these groups in your city or host the events, ping me after the presentation. I would love to help you. And this is the plan for us for today. So at the beginning, I will introduce you into the offline first approach. I will tell you what is in general the strategy. I will show you advantages of this approach. And next, we will go to the offline storages, because this is a key point to understand this approach. After that, I will show you a PouchDB. This is one technology that enables you to store your data locally in a browser, on a local site, and then synchronize it with the backend. Next point is app share model. So this is the way to increase performance of your app. And the next point, I will show you offline first apps that we're already creating with this approach and with PouchDB. And today, I want to introduce you to this offline first approach, but I also want to show you how a big impact developers have on human lives. And today, stress and negative energy has a big impact. And maybe sometimes you feel like this frog from the picture, that something happens too many times to you, regardless of you, and again. Do you know this? And maybe sometimes you feel good, but then it's better, and you feel unstable, dangerous, you're totally unstable, like, I don't know, like this. Or even as simple, small things totally frustrate you. Typically, circle, loading, small things like this. So as you can see, the sadness, the negative emotions are really important today. And a bunch of scientists did a research on human brains, and they were trying to find a solution how to make people happier. And the results was totally surprising, because they discovered that the only one way to make people happier is create fast and stable apps and use offline first. And what is in general offline first? So it means that being offline should not be an error condition. And I suppose that you already know that, but maybe not from web apps, but typically from native apps or desktop apps. If you're using Spotify and you're offline, you're not able to track music, but you're still able to edit playlists and do stuff like that. When you have internet access again, all your clients are synchronized and you see this data that was changed. If you're using Slack, the desktop version, and you're offline, you're still able to use these apps. You're not able to send message, but your app's still working and you're informed about the offline state. So what we do in web apps is that we store our data locally on the front-end side, we cache it, and show that to the users. And at certain times, we synchronize with the backend and store new data and fetch new data. So from developer's perspective, you need to write your app as it has no internet connection. So I really like compare it with mobile first. So for mobile first, you start implementation for smaller screens, and after that, you need to enhance it for bigger. And here, you start an implementation for offline state, and then you can add more capabilities to your app to make it more powerful, but you need to be sure that your apps work offline. And there's a lot of advantages of this approach. And the first one is quite obvious, that you can actually build apps that are being able to work offline, but there's more. You're able, for example, to create faster user interfaces, because all your CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete, are moved locally on your device in a browser. And we store separated data of our app, of its user interface. And we also can apply app shell model, which is really great because of performance of your app. The next point is about creating better user experience, because your user can use your app all the time, and you can inform about the state of your app, of the network, so it's very cool. And the last point, so you can batch up network requests, so you can sync up with the backend periodically versus all the time, so you can save bandwidth and also improve battery life. And there are golden rules of offline first approach. So the first one, we should use local data whenever it's possible. So you can use XML HTTP requests to get network requests, and you can store it locally. And you have few possibilities to do this. For example, you have Cache API, index database, and other offline storages. The second point is about storing separated user interface from its data, and I suppose that you already do this in your app, even if you're not familiar with this offline first approach, because it's just easier to manage your data and your logic in your Angular app. Next point is about storing state of your app locally and remotely if it's possible, to allow your user to pick up whenever he left off. And the last point about testing, so you should make sure that your app works perfectly in common and tricky scenario. And sometimes testing progressive apps can be difficult, but it's really important to remember about this. So now let's talk about offline storages. So I think this is a key point to understand this offline first approach. So this is a list with basic storages, and I suppose that you already know that, because they're very common. So for example, session storage and local storage are external storages that allows you to store data in your browser. And session storage allows you to store data for the duration of page session, including restores and reloads of your page. But local storage allows you to store your data even if you close and you open your browser. And they're really common, but have downsides. For example, you need to serialize and deserialize your data. They are asynchronous, so can block your app. And they doesn't have support for web workers. If we're talking about WebSQL, so WebSQL is asynchronous, so it's based on callbacks, so it's a little bit better, but also doesn't have support for web workers. So there are alternatives. So you can use, for example, File System API or File API. They support web worker. And File System API doesn't have much power outside of Chrome. And it's sandbox, which means that you can't get native file access. File API is a little bit better because of browser support. and includes interfaces like File API, Blob API, or File List API. But particularly in our offline first apps and PWA, we use Index Database and Cache API. And Index Database, this is document database that allows you to store pairs of key and value. And you can store here different types of data. It can be strings, blobs, JSONs, and so on. And it's the greatest one because of support for web browsers. And in Cache API, you can store pairs of request and response that represent the HTTP request and HTTP response. And they can contain any kind of data that can be transferred over HTTP. And what we do in offline first is that all necessary files that are static that you need to cache and reload to work while you're offline, you store in cache. But for all other resources, you need to use index database. And there are JavaScript libraries that are wrappers for index database, because index database can be sometimes complex for some cases. And they are just more developer-friendly and allows you to use this index database easier. And today I want to focus on PouchDB, but there are more solutions, for example, Dexy.js or JS Store or local storage. And this storage has limits. And as you can see, it depends on the browser. And these limits are set per origin. And you can use Quota Manager that allows you to check how many quota is already reached. And I highly recommend you to open DevTools and the tabs with application, because here you can check what is stored in specific types of storages. And here's, for example, for Twitter. Twitter is also progressive web app. So I think it will be a key for you to understand what can you keep and store in this kind of storages. So now let's talk about PouchDB. So PouchDB is open source JavaScript library that allows you to store data locally, sync it with the backend automatically. And this is what I said before, that it's a wrapper for index database. And this is a basic architecture that you can use in your Angular app. You have front-end side and back-end side. And on front-end side, you have PouchDB, when you can store your data locally. And you have back-end side, when you can store data remotely. This is CouchDB. And CouchDB, this is document database that is really similar to the MongoDB, if you ever used. And what we do in our front-end apps, we store data locally, and then we need to send it to the backend side. So we hook it up with the backend for replication. And if anything changes on the backend side, then it pushes changes to the front-end side. And you can subscribe these changes and react in proper way in your app. So now it's time for more practical part. So let's suppose that you have Angular app generated with CLI, with basic Angular structure. And then we want to make it work in offline, and then manage your data that is offline. So the first step, we need to cache data that is static. And for me, the easiest way to do this is just apply this command. This is ng-add Angular PWA. Because if you apply that, a lot of things will happen, and you will generate basic files that that are default, and even if you build it and you store and deploy it on a remote server, then your app will work offline. And the next step is that we need to manage dynamic data in your app. So we need to add to your app, for example, PouchDB, that is a wrapper for index database. And there are a few steps to apply this PouchDB. So you need to install it as usual, as npm package. So you have two options. First is PouchDB, the whole package. And the second option is smaller package only for the browsers. And if you don't want to install other dependencies, like for example, level database, I recommend you to use the second one. And the next step is installation of PouchDB server, because you need to serve your local data in your app. Then you need to serve it, and if you want to apply it in your app, you need to use the last one command. So if you want to add it to your file, you need to create your local database. This is PouchDB. After that, we need to hook it up with the backend for replication. And you can use method sync. And you need to add this remote database and configure it. So you need to set the configuration for replication. And in this case, you can see the bidirectional synchronization. Next step is as usual. You need to implement your CRUD operations. So the basic operations to manage your data in your app, like get, push, delete, and stuff like that. And the last one, sorry for the forbidden word, you need to subscribe these changes and react in a proper way. It depends what you want to do on these changes. So now let's talk about app shell model. So the app shell is a way to render a portion of your app via a route as a static render page. And it allows you to increase user experience by rendering static pages that you can return to your user very quickly. And from practical perspective, there are the minimal HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code that is required to power the user interface of your app. And on the right side, you can see an example. So this is how it looks. It's just a skeleton of your app, common for all pages. And you can use schematics in Angular to generate this kind of app shell. So you need to input ng-generate app shell and add two properties. The first one is client project, so the name of your project. And the second one is a name of your universal app or server app. So if you generate it, a lot of things will happen in your project, but the main change will be in your Angular JSON file in configuration. So you will see two another targets regarding to this app shell. So next point is building. So we need to run ng-run command, and regardless of your environment. The second one is for the production. And I did tests. In my tests, I created simple Angular app. I built it and deployed it as usual. And after that, I added app shell model to this app and deployed it on another host. And I did a test. I refreshed these apps 10 times. And here you can see the visual effect that on the right side, when you have an app with app shell model, you can't see that you refresh it. So you get the view very quickly. This is how app shell model works. And here you can see performance results tests. So can you see these 5 metrics? This is load time, first byte, start render, first contentful byte is speed index, and the value for this test. So as you can see, for each of these metrics, the difference between the values was over 20%. So this is what can you achieve with app shell model. And now I will present you example offline first apps that was creating with this approach and with PouchDB. So this is HospitalRun, and it's really cool. So this is open source software for developing ward hospitals. And it's great because you can take it into areas where you don't have internet access at all, and you can store healthcare data. And when you back to the places when you have internet access again, then your data will be synchronized with all your clients. And this is open source, so you can find a code of this app on GitHub. CozyCode is really cool for your daily life as a developer, for example. You can store it contacts, calendars, and files, and share it between your clients and between server. And Financer is for storing budget data in your personal devices, and it's really cool for apps when you can store this data and then synchronize it with other clients and other devices. And I want to sum up some things. So today we're talking about offline first approach that you can use in PWA. So I highly recommend you to try PouchDB and others wrappers that can help you to manage your data in your apps. And I want that you will remember about that offline first is not only about creating apps that work offline, but also it's a way to create fast and stable apps, and it's a way to save the world from sadness. And I want to invite you to PWA and offline first communities. So sometimes maybe you have a problem and it's difficult to find solution because it's not a huge community. So here you can see two spaces, there are Slack spaces, where you can ask questions and find people that also working with progressive web apps. If you want to keep in touch with PWA, you can follow PWA Fire. And if you have any questions about this, you can ping me on Twitter. And this is a great book if you want to use PWA with Angular. It was published this year, and I highly recommend you to use it. And thanks for having me. If you want to get the slides, there is a link. Thanks.